Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Alton. Thank you for everybody who is viewing this service remotely. Because of the weather, we decided to move it from the outdoor service to the indoor, and we are thankful and grateful for you to be here. My name is Robin Berkeley. My pronouns are she, her, and I am president of this congregation. I also serve as a worship associate, and I'm grateful to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects. For those of you viewing for the first time, the First Unitarian Church of Alton is a small lay-led congregation located in Alton, Illinois. We welcome everyone to this home of comfort, spirit, justice, and hope. We are Unitarian Universalists. We open the service with a prelude by our pianist, Joy Heft. Thank you, that's a great song. Excuse me. An important ritual in the Unitarian Universalist faith is the lighting of our chalice. Unitarian Universalists have many different interpretations of the flaming chalice, including the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope. Join me in celebrating all of these reasons and more. We will recite our unison words for the chalice lighting. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. So our opening prayer today is in number 419 in the Gray Hymnal. It is attributed to Kalidasa. Look to this day for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Join us in our opening hymn, number 1017 in the Teal hymnal, Building Bridges. Oh, Building a New Way? I apologize, Building a New Way. Sorry, I had that song wrong. I don't know why I put Building Bridges. It's, who knows? Right. Okay, so we're going to talk about UU principles right now. And oh my God, I really love the Babylon 5 series. It is one of my favorite science fiction shows, not because it's all pretty and everything that's all wrapped up and it's everything beautiful, because it's gritty and real, and it highlights the flaws of human beings and the continuous strive to do better. Sort of similar to the song that we just heard. I rewatched it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a little bit, but I rewatched it twice in the last year, and it still resonates for me. It still makes sense. I mean, this show came out in the early 1990s, and it still makes sense. Still impactful. So today, what I'm going to talk about I want to show how this series really helped me understand, strangely enough, the divine, spirituality, and how it actually brought me in an indirect way to Unitarian Universalism a few years later. And I believe that the message today and sort of the message of Babylon 5 really aligns with just about all of our UU principles. I guess maybe number 3 is a little iffy, but generally speaking, all of them make sense. Number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of each person. And this show, as I said, is not pretty, and it didn't get all wrapped up lovely with altruism like Star Trek does. Now, I'm a huge Star Trek fan as well, right? So that aside. But this show had flawed characters, and we see those flaws played out. Even the most altruistic, most enlightened characters still make sense, still make mistakes. And they have to deal with their own pain in terms of coming to grips with that, right? So the nice thing is that the arc of the show was all about trying over time to make sure that the inherent worth and dignity of each person is managed and honored. And it takes, obviously, it recognizes that there's fits and starts and successes and failures in doing that. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And again, the purpose, oops, I don't know what's causing that. Apologies, folks. We got some tech issues here, maybe some ghosts, maybe it's the Rev hanging out with us today. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And the space station's purpose was to do that, to make sure there was justice, equity, compassion, understanding of others. That's why that space station was built, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And all those characters were working towards that. No matter how many times they failed, they picked themselves up and they kept pushing forward to try to make that happen. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As you watch the characters over the 5-year story arc, that's what kept them moving forward. It's this search for truth and meaning. And one of the primary characters that I'm going to speak quite a bit about today, Jakar, was one of those people who really worked hard to find that arc of truth and understanding for himself. And you watch him grow and evolve to become the most sympathetic character by the end, and one revered by many in terms of his witticisms. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. And the goal of Babylon 5 was to create a station where there would be commerce and ambassadors and delegates who would come to understand each other, very much like the UN, but in space, right? But it was also a place of commerce where people could buy and sell and connect with each other. And the right of this democratic process was, as they came to resolve some of these issues, they created what they called the Interstellar Alignments. Again, that really became the equivalent of what was the UN here on Earth, but it became the UN of outer space. And it really wanted to focus on how we fairly treat each other in that process in interstellar affairs. Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, justice, and for all. Again, this is the goal of the group. No matter how many times they failed at it, they worked hard to bring about peace and liberty. And sometimes to achieve peace, they had to sacrifice themselves and make sacrifices to get there. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. And this is really pretty much highlighted throughout the whole series. You can't affect one thing without something else being impacted one way or the other. We make a decision about what's going on a certain planet here, but it affects Earth and it affects individuals on Earth, and all of those issues of how it's very well made and well intertwined. That it's not just at a planetary level, that it's at a galactic level. And when we talk about that butterfly effect, right? But this is the butterfly effect on steroids. That what we do here affects another planet, it affects another galaxy, and on and on. And I'm going to try to come back to as many of these points as I can as I get into the message. But this is a rich and rewarding show, and it was a bit slow to start, I'll be honest. So for those of you that might say, oh, I'm going to dive in and watch this now, there was some struggles in that first season of trying to get a voice and a stride, and like any series, right? But by the time they started to hit the second and third season, we saw the main characters really blossom and become comfortable in their roles and comfortable in the arc of the story. So as it was reimagined and rewritten in many ways in season 2, we ended up with a tremendous gift, an amazing gift that I think informs so much, even today. It still resonates today. So I hope you enjoy the sermon today. So our joys and joys and sorrows ritual follows today. And when we are together live, we honor our joys and sorrows by placing stones in a bowl that represents the thoughts and needs of those who are here and those who cannot be with us. Today, because we're remote, we offer this time for people to share their joys and sorrows verbally and type messages in the YouTube link or Zoom. And Alex, if you see anything, let me know. Please share your joys and sorrows if you would like, and then we will follow this with a moment of silent reflection. And I'm going to offer a happy birthday to Katie today. Happy birthday. And so that's my joy for today. And I also want you to keep Jim Moore in your thoughts and prayers. He had to undergo surgery or will be undergoing surgery soon. And Pat said she has what she needs. She has the support she needs, but let's make sure we keep her in our thoughts and prayers as well. If anybody has anything else they want to bring to the table, please do. Okay. So I'd like to take a moment then for everybody to close your eyes, ground your feet, put your arms and hands somewhere comfortably. I want you to put out positive energy for the joy that's in the world. Put that positive energy out. There's the sorrows that are in the world, both spoken and unspoken today. Take a moment to anchor to your breath, to remember the divine, to remember the interdependent web that connects all of us. When one suffers, we all suffer. Take a moment to reflect. Okay. Stewardship. We offer the gentle reminder that this community of faith is supported only by your giving. Stewardship is more than just financial donations, but is also about donating time and talent to help our church. If you can't write a check, please help our church survive and thrive by offering your time to help us. Please donate as you can with your time, talent, and or treasure. All are needed for our church to prosper. You can mail your financial gift to the First Unitarian Church, P.O. Box 494, Alton, Illinois, 62002, or you can give electronically by searching for First Unitarian Church of Alton on the Givelify app or via the link on our webpage. As well, you can give through PayPal if you prefer. If you're willing to donate your time and talent, please contact a board member and let us know what you can do to help. Give what you will and what you are able, for you are a generous, generous people. Thank you so much. So please join me in our offering prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. Our next hymn, and I think I got this one right, number 123, Spirit of Life, in the Gray Hymnal. That's what I get for reading emails really late at night. issue with slides. We'll get them resolved. I'll just continue talking like this. Okay. So our reading today is actually from the script of the show. It is considered the preamble of the Declaration of Principles for that Interstellar Alliance that evolved at the end of season 4 and into season 5, that was created by the major characters, obviously, in the show, called Babylon 5. It was written and produced by J. Michael Straczynski. The universe speaks in many languages, but only one voice. It speaks in the language of hope. It speaks in the language of trust. It speaks in the language of strength and the language of compassion. It is the language of the heart and the language of the soul, but it is always the same voice. It is the voice of our ancestors speaking through us and the voice of our inheritors waiting to be born. It is the small, still voice that says, we are one, no matter the blood, no matter the skin, no matter the world. We are one, no matter the pain, no matter the darkness, no matter the loss, no matter the fear. We are one. Here, gathered together in common cause, we agree to recognize the singular truth and this singular rule that we must be kind to one another, because each voice enriches us and ennobles us, and each voice lost diminishes us. We are the voice of the universe, the soul of creation, the fire that will light the way to a better future. We are one. Awesome. There we go. So my message today, my sermon today, is called The Book of Jakar, and how that inspired me on my path to Unitarian Universalism as a recovering Catholic. Science fiction wasn't always a big part of what we listened to as part of the Catholic tradition, although my parents were, my dad in particular was a huge science fiction fan, and he watched the original series of Star Trek all the time, and while I thought it was dated and sort of trite sometimes, I still have a soft spot for watching it and remembering my father watching that. So science fiction plays such an important role in history, in literature, in social movements, and I don't think people recognize how important it is in that process, and why might that be? Because science fiction exists so that people can explore transgressive ideas. They can explore something new and exciting. They can try to immerse themselves in challenging topics in the world of fiction. And it can be done in a way that helps people to process and sort of remove themselves from sort of the dailiness of the pain and challenges that come with, you know, having to make hard decisions about social justice issues and things like that, helping us to get better understanding of things. And we see this in the work of Ursula K. Le Guin. We see this in the work of pretty much every science fiction writer. It's like, how do we explore things like what it means to be transgender, what it means to give women rights, to have interracial relationships and kisses and same-sex relationships and kisses on TV. It's okay because it's science fiction. And we can start to help people to better understand that role. And I think that, you know, even in our own congregation, Kevin McCarthy, who used to be a part of this, and Sayer Johnson, and their documentary, Trans Geek, tried to get at those messages, right? That science fiction is a place for us to explore and understand and push the boundaries a little. And it helps to set the seeds in people's heads about how to think about issues of justice and things of that nature. So Babylon 5 is a show that came out, I believe, starting in 1994. It was the early 90s. I was in my doctoral program and watching that show and loving every minute of it. I had been suddenly, you know, enamored of, maybe it was a little later than 94, but either way, but very enamored of, you know, Star Trek, and really immersing myself in that because I was in a place of needing, you know, escapist TV, when you're diving in and you're trying to study and you're trying to understand all these things. And so I decided to start watching the science fiction, and then I got totally into it, and all that sort of stuff. And I loved it. And a number of years ago, it was for free on, I think it was for free on Netflix maybe, or Prime. It is on Prime now, if anybody wants to watch it. And I watched it a number of years ago, and I loved it. And and then it just sort of disappeared off of all the mainstream channels. And then I decided, for whatever reason, maybe because it was the same situation in 2020, needing some escapism, right? We're all locked down. We're dealing with a contentious election that was creating a lot of anxiety. And I thought, oh, I need some escapism. I need something that's going to make me happy. So I'm going to watch the show again. And surprisingly enough, it was actually interesting to see how the storylines ran incredibly parallel to what we've experienced in this country in the last number of years. A president that was narcissistic and making decisions that was not in the best interest of the planet, but in the best interest for him. And how this had repercussions across the board, not just for planet Earth, but across the galaxy, and how those things resonate. So it really did hold up, even 20 plus years after the show aired, that it was still an important message to hear it. And so as I listened to it last November, it actually created some anxiety for me as I was watching it, because I was going there for escape, and what I was feeling was all these things about what we were going through at the time, and thinking, oh my God, right? This is amazing how much it's still held up. So I watched it again about a month or so ago, and again, with different eyes, a different heart, different open mind, and it resonated still for me, and I thought, this would be a great sermon, and I need to do this, particularly as the reading that I just did, that preamble to the Interstellar Alliance, the Constitution, the Declaration of Principles, it said, wow, this is also you, and there's got to be some connection here. So I decided that would be what I would do when I had the next chance, and so here I am. So the goal of the show, the goal of the space station, as I said earlier, was about trying to connect people to understand global governance, the accountability that we have to each other, and that we need to all cooperate to get to a place of peace. And I want to read to you the opening of the pilot monologue. This was by one of the ambassadors called Lando Malari, and I will share with you who he is and why he's important in all this. But I will start with reading what became the opening monologue to that to the show. And he says, "I was there at the dawn of the third age of mankind." And I like that idea of the third age. It's like we've come to the next level of existence, right? It began in the Earth year 2257 with the founding of the last of the Babylon stations, located deep in neutral space. It was a port of call for refugees, smugglers, businessmen, diplomats, and travelers from 100 worlds. It could be a dangerous place, but we accepted the risk because Babylon 5 was our last best. Sorry, that scared the heck out of me. I don't know, honey. It's okay. We're good. We'll be gentle on ourselves. We apologize if you hear things like that. We accept the risk because Babylon 5 was our last best hope for peace. Under the leadership of its final commander, Babylon 5 was a dream given form, a dream of a galaxy without war, when species from different worlds could live side by side in mutual respect, a dream that was endangered as never before by the arrival of one man on a mission of destruction. Babylon 5 was the last of the Babylon stations, and this is its story. And it opens the arc for 5 years. So you can see just in that description, right, that it's talking about how it's the last best hope for peace, right? That we need to find a way to connect people together, to feel like how we are beholden to each other, to manage our relationships and to manage the legacy that we pass on ahead of us to those who will inherit our legacy. So I'll take you through the characters. The Minbari are one of the major characters in the story, particularly the Ambassador Delenn, who is part of the leadership council, and because of some plot twists, we find out that that many of the Minbari, their souls, their essence, is part human, and that there is a connection between Minbari and human that nobody knew at the time. And this part of that story is sort of showing you how and why they're connected in that way. And they believe in a caste system, a warrior and religious and worker caste. And what they realize by the end of season 4 is that the warriors and the religious caste have forgotten the worker caste, right? Right? This is what we do. And they say, right now, we're going to change from 3 people on our council representing warriors, 3 representing religious, 3 representing workers. Now we're going to have 2 warrior, 2 religious, and the remainder will be worker, because we have forgotten the workers. We have forgotten them and the work that they do to support our community. So they evolve themselves. And the Minbari are powerful, right? They are highly spiritual people, and also brilliant strategists, powerful in war, and they wear this duality, right, in a tension constantly. There's always this tension in the show about this difference between war and peace, war and spirituality, and how that kind of plays itself out. And Delenn becomes one of my favorite characters. Delenn is in between season 1 and season 2, he goes through a transformation, through a chrysalis, to become part human and part Minbari, so that she can bridge the gap between the 2 people to make that work. And so the next characters, if you will, are the Centauri from Centauri Pride. They are kind of Napoleonic in look, right, with the whole head hair and the lovely, elegant clothes. They're very hedonistic. They believe in pleasure, and Londo Mollari is that character who has a huge rise and a huge fall, and works to the day that he dies with his dying breath, literally, trying to redeem himself for the mistakes that he's made over his life. He becomes a character that is loathed and then pitied and then affectionately understood to be the flawed being that he is, and eventually becomes a more sympathetic character towards the end. And he has a huge ego, and he's incredibly powerful. And the Centauri are schmoozers, and they are always about deals and how we can connect with each other and how we can build. They were I think our first contact, if you will, was with the Centauri in the show line. We move on to the Narn, and the Narn is represented by Ambassador Jakar, who I'm going to speak again about a little bit more in detail. They're a former agrarian people that were enslaved by the Centauri, and then they fought back. Kind of reminiscent of the Bajorans and the Deep Space Nine and in the Star Trek series. They went from being agrarian to enslaved to now warriors, but a deeply spiritual people as well. And what I love about Jakar, which he is hands down my favorite character. I love the actor who played him, Andreas Kasoulis. He had strength, he had a rise, he had a fall, and he also had his redemption. And we see the parallel between Jakar and Mollari, coming together to build a lifelong friendship and understanding of each other, and it's not easy. Then we have the Vorlon and the Shadows. And the Vorlon and the Shadows are sort of the opposite sides of the same coin. Both are looking for how we can get strength and growth, and the Vorlon believe in order and discipline, and the Shadows believe that it comes through conflict and discord. And it's the light and the dark. And for the first few seasons, we come to believe that the Vorlon are the good and the shadows are the bad, because the light is good and the dark is bad. And until we realize, right, and I think it's about season 3, that we've been manipulated by the Vorlons, right? The Vorlons manipulate us so that we actually see them as our gods. They come to us, and when we see them in our image, right? So when we talk about God being in our image, that's what they're trying to do, is they come to us in our image. So if we were to see God, we see God as our image, but that's really the Vorlons, right? And there's a scene where in one of the episodes where the Captain Sheridan is falling from in the middle of the space station. He's had to jump out of a train, and he's flying and he's floating down to the ground. And if somebody doesn't get him, he's going to obviously hit the side and he's going to die, and it's not going to be a good scene. And so they encourage the Vorlon to go up and to take care of him and save him. And every race, species in that space saw something different. They saw something different. They saw the God that they, honored as, in their own image. So everybody saw something different. It was kind of interesting. The big question for the Vorlons is, who are you? And they want you to sort of understand who you are, and how to grow, and how to learn. And again, they like order and discipline. They like that sort of patriarchal sort of idea. You behave as you behave, and you listen, and you follow the rules. And that's what they believe is where the growth comes from. And the shadows were the opposite of that. They were the evil characters. They were the things that sort of infiltrated. They were the bad guys. Until we realized they were really just two sides of the same coin. Both sides were trying to manipulate people to be what they wanted, until they realized that this was not okay. And eventually, that all got resolved, and the shadows and the Vorlons, sort of disappeared, in later years in the episode. And so, enabling then what they would call the younger races, like the Minbari, the Centauri, the Earthers, to sort of manage that. Right? And then, of course, our Earthers, the people here on planet Earth, and how we, inspire others. The last character I want to talk about is Lorian. He is the Ancient One. They always talk about the Ancient Ones in this show. It's like the older races that are, for all intents and purposes, immortal. And Lorian's question is, while the Vorlon's question was, who are you? The shadows are, what do you want, right? But Lorian's question is, what do you have to live for? What are you living for? And I think Lorian sort of exemplifies the one, the Big Bang, the God, the whatever we want to call it, from science or faith or what have you. Lorian is the first one, the one that started it all in motion and moved things forward. All right, so my greatest inspiration, as I said, was from Delenn. Again, Minbari, half human, half Minbari, as she evolved over time to bridge that gap between the two races and Jakar. And I'm going to read something from the Book of Jaquan, because this is the holy book for the Narn characters. And for them, they were in the midst of a war, fighting this darkness, fighting those shadows. And this is what he wrote at the time. There is a greater darkness than the one we fight. It is the darkness of the soul that has lost its way. The war we fight is not against the powers and the principalities, it's against chaos and despair. Greater than the death of flesh is the death of hope and the death of dreams. Against this peril, we can never surrender. The future is all around us, waiting in moments of transition to be born in moments of revelation. No one knows the shape of that future or where it will take us. We only know that it is always born in pain. And as much as that sounds a little dark, I think that there's some truth in this, right? We know that where our greatest opportunities are for learning and growth come from not just our successes, but really it comes from our failures. and the challenges that we face and some of that pain that we face. That's where growth can happen. So we talk about like, oh, the shadows were bad and the Vorlons were good, but in fact, both are important to us. We need both. We need order, and we also need, some despair and pain to push ourselves out of our comfort zones and get us to a place of growth and improvement. And I think that is really an important message for us, for anybody, but certainly as Unitarian Universalists. It's so easy to get complacent, right? That we are who we are, and we're doing our thing, and we're reaching out. But we have to realize that even us, we make our mistakes. And I'm sorry I keep jumping. I have no idea why it keeps doing that, and I know you guys are struggling, and it's okay. So if you see me jumping, folks, I apologize. I know we're all like here going, oh my God, what's going on? But I think for our message, if we can go back to that, we can't be complacent. And I think a couple of months ago when I did a sermon on, we have to understand why people are falling into the river, not just to rescue them from the river, but how do we fix the problem so they don't fall in the river in the first place? This is where it's easy for us to just keep handing out things to help people and not recognizing that if we don't understand the source of some of these problems, we're not going to fix the problems. And that's where that tension is, the discomfort, that comes into play. For our own personal growth and development, it can't be in a place of complacency. It has to sometimes come from a discomfort that none of us want to face and none of us want to embrace. And I think when we think about who we are as Unitarian Universalists, recognizing that it's because of our love and respect for humankind, because of our willingness to do what it takes to help people, and to not just ease suffering, but to sort of to do what we can to manage suffering so it doesn't happen in the first place, to some extent, right? Things that are avoidable, like homelessness and foodlessness and things like that we need to do. So the arc for the bitter part of 3 years was about shadows and Vorlons and darkness and this light and this constant battle between the two and what impact this has on Earth politics. And the president of the Earth Alliance is unfortunately influenced and under the control of the shadows. And of course, others are now under the control of the Vorlons, and we're seeing sort of this meta fight between the good and the evil across things until they finally recognize that it's time to take care of the shadows, and that shadow war gets resolved because they finally just said, look, we're being played by these people, this is not okay, and you guys need to go home and get out of our universe and let us do our thing. And they all go home, they go to the rim, and they say, it's time to leave, it's time for us to take responsibility for our lives, and we're going to rise on our own merits, and we're going to fall on our own merits, and it's important for us to do that. And this is where, again, democratic process of how they got an alliance of people to come together to fight those two powerful races that probably could have wiped them all out, but they all stood up to them and said, we deserve better, we deserve more, and we want you to leave. It's time for us to do our own thing. We don't need you to make those decisions for us anymore. Getting away from a paternalistic approach to things and allowing for free expression and free exploration and freedom to make their own mistakes. I love that they talk about the search for truth and meaning, and specifically there's an exchange between Captain John Sheridan and Delenn, who ultimately by the end of the show get married and they fall in love and all those kind of things. And Captain John Sheridan says, I wish I had your faith in the universe. I just don't see it. And Delenn says, and I will tell you a great secret, Captain, perhaps the greatest of them all. The molecules of your body are the same molecules that make up the station and the nebula outside that burn inside the stars themselves. We are star stuff. We are the universe made manifest, trying to figure itself out. As we have both learned, sometimes the universe requires a change of perspective. And I love that because it talks about their search for truth and meaning. And John's arc also in the story is, comes from a very military background and very sort of command and control until he realizes the world is not as cut and dry, as black and white as that there's more to learn, to grow, to push himself to be that better person. And he becomes ultimately the president of this Interstellar Alliance, and he sacrifices himself. Like he was told, if you go to Zahadum, which is the home of the shadows, he would die. And he went anyway, because he knew it didn't matter, that he needed to fix the problem and to push to get a resolution to this issue, and he was willing to sacrifice himself to do that. Ishakar learns the same thing, right? That I'm going to do whatever it takes, and even if it means sacrificing some aspects for the greater good, I'm going to do this, and to get there. So speaking of Shakar, the enlightenment of Shakar is probably the most important thing for me in the series. He was a very proud person in the first season, and then in season 2 we find that the Centauri have now gone back to Narn, and they have enslaved them yet again and conquered them through a whole host of issues, right? The chaos that the shadows have sort of seeded. And he is devastated and broken to his core, and through his revelations, and I won't get into how those revelations came about, they're entertaining if you watch it. He decides that he is going to, he sees things with new eyes and in different ways. So he now is starting to write, and he is eloquent, and his words are stirring, and his words are powerful, and you've already heard some of his words. He wrote that preamble that I read in the reading, that his character is so profound in doing that. And one of the funniest parts of this is this book that he writes is, he lends it to somebody and they put a coffee cup on it and it's got a coffee stain. And in Narn culture, when you copy a great book like your Bible or your Quran, this book of Shakar becomes a holy book, and they copy everything in it, every stain, every dot, every whatever. And of course, every book now of the book of Shakar now has this coffee stain that his friend left on the book to do that. So very interesting. Anyway, he writes about what is God in the book. And he says, if I take a lamp and shine it towards the wall, a bright spot will appear on the wall. The lamp is our search for truth, for understanding. Too often we assume that the light on the wall is God, but the light is not the goal of the search, it is the result of the search. The more intense the search, the brighter the light on the wall. The brighter the light on the wall, the greater the sense of revelation upon seeing it. Similarly, someone who does not search, who does not bring a lantern, sees nothing. What we perceive as God is the byproduct of our search for God. It may simply be an appreciation of the light, pure and unblemished, not understanding that it comes from us. And I love this, right? And it goes on, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I love this because when we think about for ourselves as Unitarian Universalists, that we are the divine, that we see the divine, we experience the divine, we've been made in God's image, it's our belief, and so that divine is in us, we are God. Okay? So it goes on to say, it may simply be an appreciation of light, pure and unblemished, not understanding that it comes from us. Sometimes we stand in front of the light and assume that we are the center of the universe. God looks astonishingly like we do, or we turn to look at our shadows and assume that all is darkness, which is not true either. If we allow ourselves to get in the way, we defeat the purpose, which is to use the light of our search to illuminate the wall in all its beauty and in all its flaws, and in doing so, better understand the world around us. And this is where I come from, Everything is Holy Now by Peter Mayer, right? And I know we played it last week, so we're not going to repeat that. But the point is, that song gives me goosebumps because fundamentally, everything is holy. We are holy. The light on the wall is holy. The grass in the yard is holy. The leaves are holy. Everything is holy. And that is what Shakar is trying to get at, that the divine is everywhere. So we talk about the conclusion of the Shadow War, the conclusion of the Earth War, the development of that Interstellar Alliance. By the time we get to season 4, at the end of season 4 and into season 5, they've created this entity, and it's not perfect. It's flawed. It trips and falls also. But that Interstellar Alliance was the seed to start to think about bigger and better and greater things, about how important it is for us to honor, search for truth and meaning, to connect with the divine, to allow people to understand what their own truths are in terms of that, and with greater, not just planetary cooperation, but interstellar cooperation. These are core values for us as Unitarian Universalists. This show highlights that in such a meaningful way. And I think that, a few sort of production issues here and there and some developmental issues, it is such a rewarding show that will continue to give back to us. And I think there's so much to be learned. For me, I watched this and it started to change the way I thought about my own source of spirituality, right? At that point in time when I was watching this in the 90s, I was not very faithful and religious. And I had left the Catholic Church, and I really wasn't looking for a faith tradition. I was sort of getting into yoga a little bit, but not so much. And really, honestly, I hadn't been exploring much of anything at that point in my life. And it was kind of spiritually devoid for me. But I found a sense of spirituality and divine in watching science fiction. And it sort of opened up my head to think about things that were very different from the command and control approach that I got growing up in Catholicism. And so by the time the show had ended and I was now working and I started embracing yoga, I started embracing Buddhism, I started exploring spirituality in a different way. Ultimately, thanks to Lane Simpson, I came here, my invitation, and an open mind and heart, and it worked. And I realized that it was this notion of Babylon 5 that started me on that path. I could have been very content just staying where I was. And it was the show and others of its like that got me on that path. And I'm grateful for that experience. And I am grateful that this show still resonates. And I hope that you can share in that love for it, and maybe we can talk about it sometime. Thank you for your time and listening. And again, I apologize for some of the sparks. Who knows what's going on here today? So we'll figure it all out. Ghosts in the machine. All right. Our final hymn is number 1024 in the Teal Hymnal. I think I got this right. When the Spirits Say Do. All right. Cool. Thank you. When the Spirits Say Do. such a fun song. I like that. That was a good choice. Thank you. Yeah, you got to do all that. You got to laugh, you got to sing, you got to dance, you got to just figure it out. It's all in you, so let it go. All right, a couple of announcements. Fourth Saturday, yesterday, Mary, I think, posted in the UU Friends about how many people they served. We're continuing to do this ministry. We are going to reevaluate it, obviously, over time. But right now, while we can, let's continue to do it. If you can donate one Saturday a year, 1 month to come and help Mary, please let her know so that we can continue to support and serve as we can. So please do that. A couple other things, as we've already talked to you a few times, we had the property lines on the property here, our plot surveyed, and we noticed that part of our building is like over the line in what is actually considered city property. So I have graciously spoke with our alderman and also with the city's attorney about that, and we believe we'll be able to get away with a permanent easement because we've been here for almost 200 years, 166 something years. So we should be able to get that managed legally. We're working on that right now. We don't want you all to worry about it. It really is, it's just a legal fix at this point. There's no resistance from the city. The city still owns that property, and there's no intention of them ever, pushing us into a situation. And they said really the only issue is if we decide ultimately to sell the building, we need to have it have a clear title, which we will with the permanent easement. So, that will not be a barrier for us as we think about our stay or go decisions in the next few months. So just want to keep you up to date on that. Lastly, on Friday, last Thursday, Catherine and Buddy, who are our accountants and data analysts, and myself, we met with the state's attorney dealing with the case for Philip Harris. And for those of you that are unaware, we had an embezzlement not long ago. And so we spent some time talking with the attorney about some of the details of the case and the expectation that now that it's on the radar, that I've made a number of calls to keep it in the forefront of his mind, so that he's now very grateful for us for doing that, and that's going to start to facilitate the case and to try to get some reconciliation done. The board is in conversation now about the restitution that we are looking for in that process. So we should have some stuff to share with you as we know it once the case gets settled, and we will let you know what that will look like in due time. Also, I'm going to be leaving this coming Friday. I'm flying down to Florida, moving my mother back up here to the Illinois area, so I'll be out of the loop for probably about 4 or 5 days. But my plan is, once we get back, is to sort of to bring together the people who are interested in the ongoing stay or go discussion. We have some research that we need to do now that we have some other legal issues sort of resolved and things addressed. And now we can dive into some of the nitty-gritty of what we need to do to be able to make a better decision, an informed decision about whether or not we want to choose to stay in this building or continue to move on. I also want you to know that I am working with people in the Mid-America region. There are a number of different churches for a variety of different reasons that are going through similar discussions. Some are lucky for them, growing and outgrowing their space. Others are struggling with managing the space they have, similar to what we are experiencing here. And so we are all working together in discussion to help each other and to support each other in the process. So I just want you to know what's going on. All right, so I invite you to join me in reciting a prayer as I extinguish our chalice. The light of truth and meeting cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. Our closing words are also from Babylon 5, specifically spoken by Jacquard as he is getting ready to leave Babylon 5 for good. He is now going to explore the universe, the known universe, and explore places that perhaps he didn't know. And so he was talking with people who will still be staying behind, and as he sort of manages that. And what he says is, I believe that when we leave a place, part of it goes with us, and part of it remains, and part of us remains. It's like a little exchange. Go anywhere in the station when it is quiet and just listen. After a while, you will hear the echoes of our conversations, every thought and word we've exchanged. Long after we're gone, Our voices will linger in these walls for as long as this place remains. But I will admit that the part of me that is going will very much miss the part of you that is staying. And so, whether that resonates for us as we think about our stay or go, or whether we think about the changes and evolution as we grow and learn and explore our own worlds and our own expressions of spirituality and faith, recognize that there's still a part of us everywhere. There's still a part of us. Everything that we do, every person we interact with, every person that we touch, there's an exchange of energy and an exchange of love and connection that doesn't go away just because we no longer sit together. Keep that in mind as you go about your day. Continue to do good. Continue to exemplify what it means to be a you. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody. Thanks. And our postlude.